Hello, ladies and gentlemen. This is WeatherBrains episode number 677. This is the pre-show for Monday, January 7th, 2019. Time of the show where we share boring personal stories, humorous anecdotes, and we occasionally say outrageous things. So, we'll see who can join us this evening. Second show of the new year. We had this is the first time we've been on Monday night in a while. You know, we're typically on every Monday night at 9:30 Eastern, 8:30 Central, but due to the Christmas and New Year's holiday schedule, we have been on different nights, but we're back on Mondays. We'll see if anybody will join us tonight. In fact, I wonder if I have to figure out how to get the guests on here, because I know Bill Murray, our guest booking officer, that's the GBO, is probably watching college football tonight. For those watching later, the national championship game, the college football national championship game is on television as we do this program. And Bill is a Bammer, so he's probably watching that. So I might need to pull up my notes. And if it's just me, that'll be fun. 2.5 hours of me yakking away about weather. So let's pull up the magical show notes. I do believe this is our ham radio show tonight. We're going to do amateur radio, which is basically what got me into this when I was very young. I got my ham radio license at the age of 14, and that in turn got me into storm spotting and working with what was then called civil defense and volunteering, and that led to a marvelous opportunity to do weather for a living later in life. So I do believe we're going to have some ham radio folks on the line with us this evening. And again, maybe somebody else will join us here. This is the longest we've gone here. We've gone, 4 minutes? And it's just me. And what we should note that I know some of our folks are in Phoenix at the AMS annual meeting. I do believe Nate Johnson is there. I do believe Kim Cloco McLean is there. And we would love to have one of them join us if possible. But again, I know how challenging that can be. You know, we have done live shows from the National Weather Association annual meeting in August or September for the last several years. We have not done one from the AMS in a while. And we probably should do that sometime. It's a little harder for me, at least, to get out there. The AMS annual meeting is in January, and we're coming off time we spent away from work at Christmas, and most of our off time has been spent. And we often have wild weather in January, and it's just, and we're coming up on a ratings month with this February, so it's a little hard to get away. I want to say the last AMS annual meeting I attended was in 2013. So that's been 6 years ago. So I just got a note from Scott Martin. He says he's on the show tonight. Well, let me see if I can get him on here. Try this, because I don't have the guest information on the calendar. Ooh, Dr. John, I'm so glad you're here, because buddy, it was just gonna be me if you didn't show.
No reason to fly alone. Hey, how are you?
Good. I'm hoping we can get some of the AMS crew on with us.
Oh yeah,
in Phoenix. I know Nate is there, and Kim is there.
Oh, and she's there too. Okay.
Yeah. In fact, she sent a note earlier today that said, let's see, tonight's show.
Yeah, I saw the note too.
Okay, yeah. So it wasn't a 100%, but she'd try and join us for a few minutes. And you know how hard it is to get on during these meetings. There's so much going on. But maybe one of them can join us. It is so sad that the NOAA folks could not attend. That's just horrible, horrifying.
This brings back memories of Madison when I was in a leadership role with the NWA, and we suffered through something like this. Exactly like this, actually.
Yes, and I want to say that was what, 2012?
12.
Or 12. Because I was there. And
you were?
Yes, so many of the presentations wound up being done electronically by Skype or some type method like that, and it was a mess.
It's a real thing. So, people commit months in advance for something like this, and the weather community looks forward to this meeting, both the NWA and the annual AMS meeting, and so much information is exchanged to have it shut down like this. Criminal. Yeah,
it's just horrifying. So much planning goes into this, and I think people don't understand the importance of these face-to-face gatherings. I get so much from them. I get to meet new people. I get to meet people that I have used their products and services for years. You interact, you learn. There's a marvelous exchange of ideas that cannot be done any other way than face-to-face. And I just feel their pain. The AMS or the NWA was in Birmingham in my market in 2011, and we were on the verge of having some problems. And I think we came out okay. So Scott's on here. Scott, do I need to invite these people? I had to mute you for a second.
Oh, that's fine. Yeah, if you don't mind to invite those. I see that I can't do that on mine. So.
All right. Let me try it and see if I can make this puppy fly here. All right. There's another one. There's another one. Do you have any information? I don't have. I know Jay, but I don't know if I know Jeff or Rob. I don't have any information.
Okay, Yes, I can forward you an email that has all the information on there with bios and questions that I set up earlier.
Okay.
Let me forward that to you real quick.
Hi, Scott. How are you?
Hey, Aubrey. I'm good. How are you doing?
Good.
Good. All right, let's see. Let me find this email.
Scott's almost got a Butler County accent. Scott, where'd you grow up?
Irondale.
You sound like you got some Butler County in you.
Irondale.
I'm from Irondale. No, you go search YouTube James Spann 1974. You want to hear some Butler County accent? That's Butler County.
Oh, it's like a sauna in this edit bay.
Oh boy, I hate it when that happens.
I can't guarantee I'm going to keep my clothes on tonight, guys.
That's a show title, ladies and gentlemen.
That's pre-show.
You do not need to choose any other show title but that one.
No further.
No.
Yeah, because this is an AMS show title. Yeah, perfect.
The FCC wants to know about that one, I think.
Oh my gosh!
So, Rob Macedo, is that the correct way to pronounce this?
I believe it is. Yes, sir.
And Jeff Staple.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Well, let's. And for those that don't know, Bill, if you didn't hear the beginning of the pre-show here, Bill Murray is a college football fanatic, so he has to. Can't believe the guy's not doing WeatherBrains to go watch a stinking football game, man. Come on.
That's why I'm here.
I should have this every night. Look at this. I've got that windblown, photo shoot kind of look.
I was going to say.
Perfect.
John, be careful now.
You're doing some modeling work, Aubrey.
Right? I lost 3 pounds today. I'm on my way.
So notice that none of the guests have.
They're watching the game also.
Yeah, they're watching the game. Well, actually, I see Nate on here from Phoenix. This is good. So
howdy.
Hi, Nate.
How are you?
By the way, Aubrey, that fan is creating a little bit of noise on that mic, unfortunately.
Oh, you just got muted.
Yeah.
I'll mute myself.
And Dr. John's here too? How
Nate,
cool.
It's been a while.
It has been. How are you?
I'm doing great. How are you? Excellent.
I'm loving it, man.
So now I'm getting all these nasty messages from these guys. I can't get on here.
Oh.
It won't allow me in. See, I'm feeling Bill Murray's pain, so I think what I'm going to do is just,
front.
Yeah.
Oh, Clemson just scored again. It's 28-16.
Oh.
But Bill Murray's about to have a.
Oh, Bill's going to have a cow.
Yeah, this guy's freaking.
Well, there were 300 total yards between the two teams in the first quarter.
Yeah, this is a no defense kind of game here.
Well, it didn't help that Tua threw a pick six right there at the very beginning, too.
Yeah. Hey, Kevin.
So I'm going to get this magical link here. Send it to these guys by email, and let's see if that works. Okay. So
if I turn the fan down and I turn my mic to the other side, can you still hear the buzzing?
That's perfect. No,
perfect.
hear
Okay,
nothing
good.
now.
Oh, thank God.
Perfect. Kevin, you won't believe the show title that you missed.
Uh-oh. Let me have it.
And I haven't even been drinking tonight.
Aubrey
Show
told
title.
us not to be. Yeah, Aubrey told us not to be surprised if she took her clothes off tonight.
No. You have to give context. What I said was
No, you don't.
what I said was it's like a sauna in this edit bay. I can't guarantee I'll keep my clothes on tonight.
Yeah, that's a worthy. I can see your hair blowing.
I had to turn a fan on.
Wow.
I'm dying in here.
Wow.
50 degrees here in West Michigan today, if you can believe that.
No, I can't. Although we've climbed, I have 31.1 now after a nice sleet event this afternoon.
Yeah, we had sleet this morning too on the way into work, and I didn't grab my coat on the way out and ended up being 50 when I left this afternoon. So we really got we got in that warm sector for a while. Now they're talking lake effect snow again tomorrow evening. So it's just, I haven't even had to break out the shovel this year, if you can believe that yet in West Michigan. So that's pretty strange.
Same down here in northern Indiana.
Yeah, it's unbelievable.
We're wedged now, and I went 62 for tomorrow. I'm so excited.
You went 62.
I went 62. Well, the models they don't handle these warm spells. They had like 52 on Sunday, and we went 58. We hit 58 on Sunday.
Yeah.
And they're going like 50. They're going 57 tomorrow. So I said, forget it. I'll go 62.
Oh, the guidance, keeps pulling back towards climatology every single time, and we're never going to climatology.
No.
So let me welcome our television viewers. It's 32 minutes after the hour. We were about to start WeatherBrains, and it's Monday night. You know what this is. Come on, we do this every week. So I think everybody's on here. Hey, Rob, can you hear us okay?
Yes, I can. Can you hear me?
Yeah, man, loud and clear. I think we're all, Jake, you hear us okay?
Yep, I got you loud and clear.
All right.
Sitting here thinking about Aubrey's show title, maybe you should use that and see if the download numbers go up.
No, there's we know how to pick show titles. That's the only we have to get it on the audio segment somehow on the podcast. So all right, let's get this thing started here. And we all right, so both recorders are going. Here we go in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Hey, this is the weekly show that's all about weather. WeatherBrains, episode number 677 for the 7th of January, 2019. And I'm excited about this show tonight because we have the subject matter that is near and dear to my heart. But first off, before we do anything else, let's bring in from Harrisonburg, Virginia, Aubrey Urbanowitz, who is in a stuffy hot, uncomfortable edit booth.
Starting with me.
You want to? Do you want to explain more about that situation?
If I have the windblown look tonight, it is because there is a fan going because I'm dying in here. And I may have to stop and go get more water because I'm almost out. So apparently they keep this thing roasting. I'm not sure what's going on, but it's, 37 degrees outside and it's about 78 in here.
How does that work? I mean, I don't understand that. In sometimes in the summer, it can be 95 degrees outside. You walk in our studio and it's like a meat locker in there. It's like, 20 below zero. So,
and the edit bays are actually quite warm. They actually do keep fans in here, but this one, my typical bay is, if you can see, that's our weekend sports guy took my normal bay tonight. So I should have kicked him out. I should have pulled the old lady card and kicked him out. So. Yeah, so actually a lot of our edit bays are kind of full tonight, so I'm stuck with this stifling sauna in here.
All right. Well, Nate Johnson is at the American Meteorological Society annual meeting in Phoenix, Arizona. Nate, we are so glad you're here. How's it been going so far?
Good first day, actually. I got an actually good first day for me. The conference actually started yesterday, but I didn't get in until about 7:30, 8 o'clock last night. I do have to rag on Phoenix. A little beautiful downtown. The convention center is gorgeous. But I got in and I didn't want to risk not being able to get something to eat last night. So I just grabbed some food at the airport, at Sky Harbor Airport. Some of you may have spent some time there connecting flights. I am of the opinion that a bad plate of barbecue beats a good plate of most everything else. That assumption has been challenged. Officially, I had not good barbecue last night. I will not name names, won't name the joint, but it was a disappointing experience to say the least. So I think I just need to stick to a barbecue south of the Red or east of the Mississippi.
So stay away from barbecue at the airport in Phoenix. See, if nothing else, you've learned something useful on this show.
And that's your show title.
Yeah. How bad was it, Nate?
Say what now?
How bad was the barbecue? I mean, let's get graphic.
There were no physiological effects, if that's what you mean. But I rarely regret eating something. My doctor and my weight would probably suggest that that's the case. I regret that choice I could have made. Not eating would have been better. A chicken sandwich from McDonald's would have been better. And that's, like I said, it hurt. It was not good. It was drowned in sauce. I mean, I got brisket and pulled pork. It was drowned in sauce. And there was a reason they drowned it in sauce, because the meat had no flavor. So you live and learn. All good.
So tell us quickly about AMS with the lack of the NOAA folks, the Weather Service people there. How are they handling that situation?
Yeah, the federal folks are missed. There's no question. It does. The meeting does not have the same kind of to it. I mean, you can feel it in the air. I was talking to the registration folks today. About 4,000 people registered for the meeting ahead of time, and as of last night, some 425 had officially canceled, and they were thinking the number might rise as high as 700. And there's been a lot of, I've been pulled into moderating a panel on Wednesday because Tanya Francine and Matt Moreland from the Weather Service can't be here. And that's there's just about everybody's having to pull double weight or pitch in. And we're happy to do it, but wish we didn't have to do it. So, and I'm really concerned that our science is going to be held back a little bit because of the interactions and the knowledge exchange that should be happening here that is not going to happen to its fullest extent. And I think the impact from that it's hard to measure, but I think there's no question that it will be significant and it will be long lasting.
It's just a big mess. Dr. John, you've been down this path before when you were involved in an NWA meeting in Madison a few years back. It's not good.
No, you really have to scramble. And as Nate was saying, a large percentage of at least a third to a half of the talks are coming from Weather Service folks. They're moderating panels, as Nate was saying. They play a leadership role in the organization. And when they cannot be there, the entire society feels the effects. And those are also long-reaching. We're talking about information that's not getting out there that's absolutely paramount to protecting life and property. We seem to have lost track of that at times. So I think it's a dire situation right now with the federal government.
And it looks like there's no sign of any end to this thing.
Add to that, at this point, no. To add to that point, the fellows were announced, formally. They've been out there. The AMS fellows. It's just something for those not familiar. I mean, this is the sort of one of the highest honors that the organization can bestow on one of its members, is to make it a fellow of the AMS. And more than half were not there yesterday because they've been furloughed and whatnot. And that, it seems like small potatoes in the grand scheme of things. You still get to put it on your resume. You still get to claim it. But you think about, this is an organization of your peers, in many cases your mentors, your scientific idols, and they bestow this honor on you, and you can't be here. That's bound to be disappointing. And I feel for the folks to receive that recognition. And I feel for the folks that have put a lot of work into organizing sessions and putting talks together who can't be here.
That's a mess. Kevin Selle, how do we solve this problem?
Well, as everybody was talking, it occurred to me this has happened, more than once now. It's not a real solution, but maybe a partial solution is AMS and/or others. I mean, do you consider backing up the date? Not in January when we've seen this happen several times.
Well, it's funny you mention that, because that was talked about, and after Madison, right, the NWA moved its meeting out of October to September. They didn't really pin it down, but they said, let's get it toward the end of the previous fiscal year rather than the beginning of a new one when you're subject to seeing shutdowns. And but I think this sort of proves, I mean, we're not in a point where the is working on a budget that is passed and matches up to the traditional fiscal year timelines. We're just not. We're doing continuing resolutions and temporary increases of the debt ceiling and all that kind of stuff. And if you look at the first few government shutdowns since the 1970s, most of them were in that October time period. But we've had them in December, we've had them in January, we've had them in February. I don't know that there is a safe time, and I think it just beholden. There are a couple of things, that there is going to be an economic impact to the AMS, meeting revenue, and they spend a certain amount of money expecting thousands of people to show up, and they're not going to get a return. It's not that this is a profit center for the organization, but they have bills to pay. They're renting out the convention center for a week. Right. They're obligating themselves to a block of hotel rooms that have now been canceled. Things like that. All of that money adds up, and it will be a negative impact. So the organizations like the AMS and NWA need to, and NWA has already done this, get insurance for the eventuality that one of their meetings is going to be negatively affected, just so that the organization can stay financially healthy. Yeah. So that's one piece of the puzzle. And Dr. John, you've been, an officer of the NWA. You know that part of the responsibility of being an officer is to make sure that the organization remains, healthy. Financially is one of those important parts of that.
Yeah, Nate, I was one of those people that actually pushed for cancellation insurance after we got stuck, and lost 5 figures actually as a result.
Goodness. Well,
so
we'll talk more about this.
Calculations here suggest impact could be 6 figures for the AMS for this meeting.
Oh, goodness. Wow. All right. Well, let's get to our topic here. We want to bring in our guest panelist, Scott Martin. Scott is with the Weather Factory, works with Bill Murray. So, Scott, Bill is crying tears of football sadness right now. As we do this show here, Alabama is losing to Clemson, 28 to 16. Yeah. Yes. So, Scott, is Bill okay? Do we need to check on him? Call 911 or anything?
He's been pretty silent on his text messaging, so I'm sure he's probably got his face buried in a pillow right now, yelling as loud as he can.
Yeah, I have communicated with the Alabama football people a number of times over the past 3 days. I helped them with weather support, and the weather has been horrible horrible in the Bay Area with wind and rain, and it's not raining tonight, but it's been kind of a rough go out there. But anyway, let's move on to the subject at hand: amateur radio and how it relates to weather. And we've got three top-notch amateur radio operators on the show. First off, let me bring in Jay Farlow. Jay is a friend of mine. Jay is Whiskey 9 Lima Whiskey. Jay, how are you, sir?
I am well, thanks. It's an honor to be here with you this evening.
Great. Well,
you're pulling for Alabama in this game, aren't you? I can tell.
Yeah. See, Jay, on the other hand, is
my Skywarn shirt like a couple of other guys did, but I couldn't pass out the opportunity. I'm not an alumnus or anything, but I have close family ties to Clemson. My brother-in-law, my sister's husband, is their band director.
Awesome. And you know, the coach of Clemson is a great guy. Sweeney, he originated here in my market. He went to Pelham High School, which is about 5 miles south of the television station here. And you know his background, and he's just a great guy. So whoever may the best team win. So
Indeed.
There you go. But Jay, thanks for joining us tonight. Also, Rob Macedo is on the line with us tonight. And Rob, your call sign, I don't have your call sign. What's your call sign here?
Call sign is KD1CY, Kilo Delta 1 Charlie Yankee.
Okay, and you are located exactly where?
In New Bedford, Massachusetts.
Oh.
And you are director of operations for the VoIP Hurricane Net. Is this the old 20-meter hurricane net from the old days?
No, actually, that's the Hurricane Watch Net that's on 20
Hurricane
meters.
Watch Net. Yeah, there you go.
And my good friend Bobby Graves, KB5HAV, runs that net. Our net is a little younger than that. Their net has been in service for over 40 years. Our net has been in service now for about 14 years. So a little bit younger, but another net that supports the National Hurricane Center in Miami.
Awesome. And let's see. I think everybody has been introduced here. Rob, or I'm sorry, Jeff Staple.
Yeah.
Jeff, give me your call sign.
W8SW8, Whiskey 8 Sierra Whiskey X-ray, W8SWX.
Great call. By the way, whenever the ham radio guy is going to hear, the audio is so good. I mean, these guys know what they're doing. So Jeff, you are involved in Skywarn, and I'm going to ask all you guys, what got you started into ham radio? And I'll tell my story here later, but what got you started, Jeff?
Sure. I was always interested in weather. And when I was younger, my wife and I, when we first started dating, she got me a CB because that was the way everybody talked about weather. So we had a big event rolling through the area. I tuned on the CB, and all of a sudden, I heard nothing. I heard probably a lot of things I shouldn't repeat on this broadcast here, unfortunately, on CB radio. But so I listened for a while and didn't hear anybody. So my wife had read in the paper about the Skywarn classes that the National Weather Service had posted, and so I ended up going to that class. And because it's nerds like me who and all of us here love weather and love doing that. So it was a way for me to get involved in weather, and great classes. And off to the side, I heard these guys talking about ham radio, and I thought, well, that sounds kind of expensive, or all this radio and stuff I have no idea about. And so I kind of passed it by, and it was the next year we'd gone to the class, and I'd already been through the training and knew a lot. So we went to sign in, and two of the guys that were taking down information were ham radio operators, and they had a ham radio there. And so I kind of skipped the class, and I went over to them, and I said, tell me a little bit about this ham radio. And so one of the gentlemen was kind of tuning the radio, and we were listening to, he's showing me how they use repeaters and the green nets and yellow nets and red nets, and how it's a lot more active in weather than just regular spotting. So that got my interest piqued a little bit. And then another gentleman had come walking over, and he grabbed the radio, and we were talking for a little bit, and we were tuning on the frequency, and all of a sudden we heard something on like 171 megahertz that nobody should have been on. And we're listening, and they're talking about roll clouds and shelf clouds, and we're trying to figure out what is going on. And the guy grabs pen and paper, and he goes, take that, that frequency and multiply it by 3. We're listening to a third harmonic of 440 megahertz microphone in the other room. and I was just blown away at this information, and it really just kind of piqued my curiosity. So after that, he said, I'm kind of doing a class here, and so you missed the first 2 weeks, but if you want to show up on Monday night, I'm sure you can catch up and get involved in that. And so I did, and like that, I was hooked. The guy, Mark K8MHZ is his call sign, and he is a licensed electrician. And so every Monday night for me was not just learning about radio, it was almost like a math class and a science class. I mean, capacitance and resistance and circuits, and just every Monday night was just full of information. So that's how I got started in ham radio, and it was just the love of weather, and it's certainly nothing that I would ever have guessed myself getting part of, but I've made a lot of friends. It's a great community, and it also helps, do what I love to do, and that's weather, and I can become more involved. And I was this coordinator from 2009 all the way up to 2015 for our county, and so had a great relationship, still have a great relationship with the National Weather Service. They really embrace ham radio operators, which is wonderful, and we serve a great purpose to them. If they don't have a radio, or if we have a big event, usually there's an operator that will be at our National Weather Service office, but we use it as our group also. It's the most efficient, effective way to communicate during severe weather. If anything goes down, I can still talk to people. We have that great big lake out there just to my west, and if you put a pin in the middle of that lake, it's about a 75-mile jaunt to any radar site that there is around our area. So, it becomes vital when storms are coming across the lake that we have people at the lake shore that can get information to the National Weather Service as quick as possible. And within 5-10 seconds, we can relay any information that we need to them, no matter what happens. And I think a lot of the amateur radio guys here will attest. I've got backup batteries for all my radios and everything. So if anything happens, we can maintain communication. We have Sunday night nets here also that we can practice our nets and the communication. So, that in a nutshell is how I got involved in it. And it's just been a way that I can continue with my passion, and I love every bit of it.
All right, Jay, so tell us a bit about your story. And one question people ask, what's the deal? Everybody's got a cell phone. Who needs ham radio? I mean, who needs these guys? How would you respond to that, Jay? And Jay, you are muted.
Muted, yeah.
Whoops. You'll need to unmute. There you go.
That was my fault. Sorry about that. So I'll tell my story first, and I'll answer your question about why ham radio is still important. As far as ham radio, I have been interested in science and electronics since my earliest days. I was the boy in 3rd grade who, instead of asking Santa for toy guns and sports goods, that sort of thing, I was asking for those do-it-yourself electronics kits and weather stations and stuff like that in the 3rd grade. So when I got into my early teens, my dad, who worked as an engineer, a mechanical engineer at a company called Magnavox, that I'm sure James has heard of. It's not around by that name anymore. He worked in the government side of that. And he had friends, obviously, there who were ham radio operators, and they encouraged him to have me look into that hobby. So I took a class from the local radio club and got my what we called the novice license at the time. I was 14 years old in 1973, and a year later I upgraded to a higher class of license. And in terms of the weather side then, James, for me it was the same event that you always talk about, April 3rd, 1974. Yep. And I was a 15-year-old kid in junior high at the time, maybe high school, and I didn't have the necessary equipment yet. All the ham radio stuff for weather was on what we call VHF, and I hadn't acquired any of the VHF equipment yet. I was still just on shortwave, but I was listening on the broadcast radio to all that stuff going down and wanted so much to help. So the first chance I got, I acquired one of the radios and went to the class. To this day, I don't remember exactly when. It was probably sometime in high school. So I've probably been a trained spotter for several decades now, and that's sort of what got me started. Now, in terms of, you're right, cell phones are everywhere now. And if we have a moment later, we can talk a little bit about the history of how ham radio got involved in the Skywarn program. But now anybody can contact the Weather Service any number of ways. And our local weather forecast office here in Northern Indiana has really reached out to people who are not hams and encouraged them to report via Twitter or by calling in with voice calls on their telephones. But ham radio remains important for a couple of reasons. One is it's really the only medium where all of the spotters who are involved in an event can hear each other's reports as they make them. If I'm not a ham radio operator and I call in a report on the telephone, the rest of the spotters in the field are not going to know about that report until and unless the Weather Service issues a local storm report. But if I'm a ham radio operator and I'm on the same channel that all the other ham radio operators are using to make their reports, I'll hear that report as it's made. And it's great for situational awareness. I know what's going on near me, where to look. I can sometimes confirm or deny somebody else's report. That's, for me, probably the biggest benefit of ham radio is just that situational awareness. It's like being on a big conference call where everybody can hear everybody else and everything that's going on. Then the second big factor, I think, for ham radio is its durability and reliability when other means of communication go down. Just here with Hurricane Michael recently, you may have heard there was a significant outage of some cellular telephone services in the area around landfall, but ham radio kept on working. So that's, to me, is the second big advantage of ham radio.
Yeah, what people don't realize, their fancy phones, there will be a day where they don't work. They get on there to send a text message, make a phone call, and it doesn't work. This is after or during a weather emergency. And so I totally agree. The reliability is absolutely crucial. But let's go to Rob. Rob, kind of tell your story and again, what you do with the VoIP Hurricane Net.
Sure. So I got my interest in amateur radio started when my father gave me an actual 2-meter ham radio when I was roughly about 8 years old. And I used to listen to these weather nets on the Mount Greylock, Massachusetts repeater that at that time actually covered much of eastern New York and western New England. And I lived in Saratoga, New York at that time. And as I got into my teenage years, I really wanted to get my amateur radio license and start to participate as I really gained an interest in 2 areas. One was electronics and engineering, and the other was weather. And I got my amateur radio license when I was 15. I actually did some work with the Saratoga County, New York RACES group with Skywarn for the National Weather Service, Albany, New York location, and actually ran a couple of nets in their area before I moved for college for electrical engineering. And I was kind of busy with engineering for a couple of years. But as I got into the second half of my college years and into professional life in engineering, I really got into Skywarn, deeper into amateur radio, and actually started volunteering and coordinating the National Weather Service Taunton, or the
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10.
Oh, hang on. Let me mute Kevin here. He's over there babbling away. All right, go.
Yeah, no problem. So I was at the National Weather Service Taunton, Mass office as the amateur radio volunteer coordinator there. And we started to brick by brick build our Skywarn program here in southern New England, which now has roughly over 8,000 spotters, 1/3 are amateur radio operators. And as some of you may know, our amateur radio station call on Facebook and Twitter, WX1BOX. So we post on social media as well as on amateur radio. We get reports in amateur radio. We get reports in social media. We use some of the different apps that are out there for messaging apps for reporting, and try to build a situational awareness picture with all of our means of being able to gather reports. And in the mid-2000s is when I started as a net control operator for the VoIP Hurricane Net. And this was in 2004. And this was kind of a new thing to be able to link amateur radio systems in over the internet. And you say, well, the internet will go down, so why would you want to link amateur radio systems over the internet? Well, it just depends on the situation. You know, I can tell you in 2017, HF propagation was very poor. We've had a lot of poor propagation because the sunspot cycles and HF propagation at times has not been good for us. And but in this case, we actually had an amateur radio operator who was on St. Lucia Island. He had VHF coverage into the island of Dominica as Hurricane Maria was just basically destroying that island. And he was able to get us about a half dozen of reports from amateur operators that were pretty much losing everything. And they still were on their VHF frequency giving reports. And those reports came to our net because he was on St. Lucia, not in the heavily impacted area where his radio system was linked into the internet. And he gave us those reports by that method that we then shared with the Hurricane Center and then was used at the in the advisories for Hurricane Maria. And it's just another way, and it's another a testament to amateur radio's flexibility. You know, we can do the very, very low-tech direct communications, whether it's HF or VHF, or we can link some of the modern systems when they are available to our means to be able to do work. And you know, so I joined the net in 2004, became the director of operations about a year later, and each year we try to get a little bit better with our reporting, and it's from direct stations that are in the area. We also have done a lot of work relaying data from different weather stations that may be online until they go offline. Being able to reach out to people on social media that we may be able to get reports from. And, you know, because I think one of the things that's interesting, my background is technical and engineering and in the data storage area. And obviously a big thing out there is data science. And I kind of view a lot of what we're trying to do to gather weather information and ground truth and surface reporting as a data science problem, where we're trying to gather data from all these sources, centralize it, figure out the good data from the bad data, and push forward the good data for everybody. And when it's ground truth, it means a lot more to people in the warning process, whether it's hurricanes or other forms of weather. So I'm hoping someday maybe to combine the engineering and technical piece with the passion I've had for weather into one resource and field someday. But I've definitely enjoyed all the work in amateur radio. I've met some great people, and including Jay, who's one of our net controls for our network. And I'm very lucky also with our local weather service office. We have a great amateur radio station. We just moved into a new building, and luckily it was before the shutdown and whatnot. We got funding for all new amateur radio equipment at our weather service office. And they've even allowed myself and a couple of our other key coordinators to teach the Skywarn spotter classes in our region, which has really been enjoyable. Another way to reach the non-amateur radio spotters to get them active and maybe get them to become amateur radio operators. So there's a little bit of a mix of Hurricane Net interest and how the Skywarn interest regionally here in New England stoked my interest into the Hurricane Net.
And Rob, I'm going to add in there really quick that I had watched your video that you had posted a while ago when those storms came through your area and your station was taking reports and everything. And that's an exceptional video of what amateur radio can do for, you know, relaying the message and how quickly that message got in. So I've showed that video a few times to our class and to our amateur radio operators too. So when you get new hams in and new people that want to do more with weather than just regular spotting, they can get more interested in and have a bigger part in that. So that video is outstanding.
Well, thanks, Jeff, for those comments.
And speaking of media, James, if you'd like, I've got some audio I can play of a ham radio Skywarn net in action. Is that something you'd like to hear?
Yeah. And before you do that, explain what people hear net control and these nets. Kind of give the basics of what that is for those that don't know.
Absolutely. First off, net is just short for network. So a Skywarn net or Skywarn network is just a network of spotters, a group of spotters. And during severe weather, if you're a ham radio operator, you know that all of the spotters are going to gather on a particular radio frequency, a particular spot on the dial, so to speak. And so everybody tunes the radio to that frequency. And essentially what happens is a big conference call. Most of us have been in big conference calls on the telephone as part of our business work. This is like a big conference call on the radio. And just like on some of the bigger conference calls at work where you have a moderator who kind of decides who gets to talk when, in a ham radio Skywarn network, you have a moderator. We call that person a net control station or NCS, who kind of coordinates and moderates the whole conversation to make sure the information flows in the right order and properly. And usually we have a liaison also to the National Weather Service. Often as Rob and Jeff have pointed out, it's somebody, a ham, who's actually operating ham radio equipment at the Weather Service office. So they can receive those reports directly over the radio as they're made. So that's basically what a Skywarn net is, just a big conference call on the radio that's moderated by a net control station and has a liaison of some sort to the National Weather Service. How's that for an explanation?
That's good. Now, on your audio, is this VHF or HF, or where does this take place?
Almost all local Skywarn operations are in what we call the VHF, or very high frequency bands. We often refer to them as a 2-meter band. Around, in frequency terms, it's around 146 megahertz. Some of them are on UHF. Very little local Skywarn activity happens on the shortwave bands, and the main reason for that is static caused by lightning. It's the modes that we use on the shortwave bands are much more susceptible to lightning static than the modes we use on VHF and UHF. And that's why and that's also why ham radio is better than CB radio for storm spotting, because CB radio is down in the shortwave area and it's also susceptible to lightning static. Yep.
Good old, 28 megahertz. That's the CB band, I think. Yeah, roll
27.
that audio, Jake.
All right.
Yeah,
so
27. Let's roll it.
I got to share my screen first, I think.
Yeah,
so
28's our 10-meter band. 27 is CB. That's right.
Right. So here comes the screen share. Let me know when you see it.
Okay, we see it.
All right, so I'm going to click a button here. This is from a presentation I did. And what you're about to hear is an actual recording of an actual ham radio Skywarn net that was operating in April 9th of 2015 near New Rochelle, Illinois. And you're going to hear a ham radio operator call in a report.
Hey, can you boost the audio there a little bit, Jay?
Of Boone County, I have a funnel cloud approximately 1 to 2 miles to my east. Okay, copy that. You said to your east? To my southeast, I have a debris cloud. Copy, debris.
Okay, so that is what a ham radio net can actually sound like. The spotter was calling in with his FCC assigned call sign phonetically. It's N9MXQ, but he used phonetics, November 9, Mike, X-ray, Quebec. And those of you who have had spotter training are going to be aware that the type of report actually changed as he made it. He started in calling a funnel cloud because he could not see debris on the ground. But as he was making his report, he began to see debris. Now he's reporting a tornado. And that's how it works.
Yeah, this is riveting stuff, and it's important, I think, for us as professionals to be sure we're tied into this. For a long time, I would have in my ear 146.88, which is the local Skywarn repeater here. But I wanted to ask Jeff. Jeff, talk about November 17th, 2013. You were involved in that outbreak, right?
Yeah, that was I guess if you're going to ask or have an event that's going to go exactly how you'd want it to go, that was one that would work. I mean, we were in good communication with our National Weather Service from November 15th. And that was the day 3 was Sunday, and they only had a slight risk for us, and we were kind of off to the west of it. And so the way it progressed is, we were in good communication. They upgraded us to a moderate risk on Saturday, and they were in touch with our spotters. I, in turn, being a net control operator and the Skywarn coordinator at that time, we ended up getting, I sent an email out to who would be available for the next day and had a list of people that were able to sign on or call into the net. So that morning, we were up to date on the net, the web chat. They keep us well informed, the web chat. I'm very grateful that they let 4 of us in our county have access to the web chat for severe weather purposes and another way to pass communications. But we did the same thing. We were in contact with our National Weather Service during that event. We actually had a tornado, and I've got. I'm gonna hand it back to you, and I'm gonna get, if you're all right. I've got a little bit of audio I'd like to play for that quick little bit of the the event that we had on the 17th also, if that's okay.
Yeah, if you got it, roll it. Sure.
Okay, it might take me. You guys can carry on for a few minutes. It might take me a second to get that up.
So let me go to the obvious question here. And again, I guess, Rob, I'll go to you. Let's say somebody's listening to this show and they're thinking, okay, I want to get involved in this. What do you need to do to get a ham radio license in 2019?
Yeah, so it's pretty straightforward these days. In fact, just going through this, one of my cousins is hopefully going to get his amateur radio license in the next month here. And there are online practice tests that you can look up on the internet, where you can start taking the tests online to practice up. And then you could get a reference manual, a license manual from the ARRL, roughly about $25, $30. It's a good kind of reference to understand the background, understand some of the basic technical formulas that are with some of the electronics, and have a kind of a reference for the rules. But the practice tests are online, so as you get proficient on those practice tests, and you start scoring well on those, then you can go to a volunteer examiner session that are done locally. Again, you can go to the league website. They have a place where you can put in your zip code, and you can find volunteer exam sessions in your area, and then you go in and you take the test. I forget what the fees are running these days, but it's no more than $10 or $20 to get take the test. And if you pass it within about 5 to 10 days, minus the government shutdown, you'll get your amateur radio license, and you'll be able to get on the air. And then equipment-wise, some people say, well, sometimes amateur radio is very, very expensive. It just depends on what kind of radios you want and how involved you want to get into it. A handheld with some of the Chinese gear that's out there can be relatively cheap. Even some of the better, I don't want to say better gear, but some of the more sophisticated gear maybe from some of the main amateur radio suppliers are a bit more, but in the $100 or $200 range for a handheld. You can even find a rig to put in your car or use in your home for that price if it's on one band, maybe around $300 or so if it's a dual bander, for a couple of different bands, especially if you're interested in the weather aspect. So it really just depends on how deeply you want to get involved into it. And then one of our programs that we use it for the VoIP Hurricane Net. We use it here in our New England Skywarn operations. Is a program called EchoLink, and that's a free program. You can even put it on your cell phone as an app and use it off for your cell phone. You have to have your amateur radio license still, but it's just another flexible way to communicate and reach radio systems that you may not be able to reach otherwise if you're not near a radio setup.
And let's clarify, you do not have to know Morse code. Right?
That is correct. No more Morse code requirement for any of the bands. At one point, it was just VHF, UHF, and now there is no requirement for Morse code anywhere now for any of the license classes.
Go ahead.
That said, many folks like to use the mode, but it's not a requirement anymore.
I like to say, James, and this should be applicable to your audience, the written test is mostly about a little bit about how radios and electronics work, a lot about what the regulations are, so people don't accidentally go break the regulations. I like to say, if you're enough of a weather geek that you have a pretty good understanding of the science and mathematics that go with weather, you can pass this test.
Yeah, but and to show you how times have changed, when I got my license, this was in 1970. I was 14 years old. For the novice class license, that's the entry level, you could take it before a volunteer examiner. Every other test for the higher class licenses, general, advanced, extra, you had to go before a FCC exam guy. And so I would get on the bus from where I lived in Tuscaloosa to Birmingham, the Greyhound bus, every year, and go in front of this guy in the federal building and take that exam. And he was a creeper looking guy. I mean, the guy scared me half to death. I mean, he looked like, the death angel, but he'd send the code and you had to do the Morse code. And the extra class, it was 20 words per minute, which is, you have to be pretty good to do that. And then you took a pretty hard test. That extra class exam was fairly hard, but I just spaced them out and did it once a year. But it's so much easier today, and that you don't have to take the Morse code exam. And some people still use that. I love Morse code. In fact, when I was a kid, I always won the left foot Morse code contest at the Hamfest. I was that guy, and I was in the CW traffic nets every night. But you don't have to know Morse code, and I do agree. That exam, it's almost like a kind of a screen. Back in my days, the CB stuff was rough. I mean, I had no interest in that. I was not interested. But the ham radio guys were disciplined, and they were good communicators, and they were sincere about their interests, and the ones that love weather. And I think that exam kind of weeded out those that weren't that serious about it. So, all right. So having said that, let's see if Jeff's got that audio. Jeff, you ready?
I'm not able to get that up and playing right now, but there was just some good contact between us and the National Weather Service, and the ground truth for that tornado. We had a spotter there after that tornado touched down within 4 minutes of them issuing the tornado warning and the storms passing. So as I was watching the storms, we were able to give that information. We had light poles that were blown over. We had signs that were tore off. We had trees that were toppled, and we were able to get that to the National Weather Service within 4 or 5 minutes and get that information back. And they actually extended the tornado warning into Newaygo County, where they had some damage there. So I think the biggest thing is just the speed in which you can get that information to the National Weather Service. And I think Jay had said about the nets, the net control. It's like well orchestrated chaos, if you will, when you have all these reports coming in, because we practice that every Sunday night, and we practice nets. So when we do our Sunday night net, it is in a directed net, which means all traffic goes through our net control station. So I think it's important, if you're practicing that every Sunday and you have an event happen, it was just like clockwork. We were controlling the information. Our liaison station was transferring that information to the National Weather Service without me even having to say anything to the National Weather Service or to the liaison station. He just knew to take that information, pass it on, and it was seamless. So I think that's the biggest thing, is just how well you can get that information. And we're trained in communicating. So when you have trained communicators in that kind of situation, I think it just flows a lot easier, and you're able to get that information where it needs to go as quick as possible.
As I was thinking about this discussion this evening, for some reason, the November 10th, 2002 event came to mind, and I was thinking about this outbreak. So if you're watching, I'm actually sharing the LSR from SPC for that event. This is November 10, 2002, and there were over 600 severe weather reports, almost 100 tornado events. If you remember this event, this was the Van Wert tornado that hit that movie theater. And due to the actions of one of the individuals working in that theater, saved the people in that theater, because there were vehicles that were flown into the theater. So as I was going through this, I was actually looking at the reports, and sure enough, if I just scroll down a little bit and look at the reports from Van Wert, look at this. Damaged structures reported by ham radio operator. This was in there for a couple of times from Van Wert. So my question to Jay and Jeff was, now I know this is a little bit south of you, but were you involved in any of the ham radio operations on that day?
I was. Van Wert I'm in Allen County, Indiana, which is right on the Indiana-Ohio state line. Van Wert's the next county over. So at the time, we were running a regional net here in Fort Wayne, and Van Wert was one of the counties that reported into our regional net. I wasn't a net control station or even in any kind of leadership position at the time. I was just another spotter. And so I was on the frequency. I was participating in the conversations. I didn't have anything to report. This is one of those storms, and this seems to often happen with Van Wert County. We like to joke around here that Van Wert County is a tornado magnet, because it's not unusual for storms to come right over Fort Wayne and not do anything and then drop something bad on Van Wert County. And this was one of those times. So I didn't have anything personally to report that day. But as soon as it got across the line, Van Wert County got hammered.
And this is one of those events, what we call a late season severe.
Indeed.
So this is even more critical to get that information out. This is not the time of year folks in the Midwest are thinking about tornadoes.
Right, exactly. It's our second tornado season. We often talk about that in the spotter training, is that we have
absolutely.
Our main season in the spring here in northern Indiana. It runs from about March to about June, and then we have the second season that comes around October.
Right.
Right. That event for me was a little bit off to the south of me. I live in Muskegon, Michigan, which is about halfway up the state along Lake Michigan. But that November 17th, 2013 event was a real late season for us too. It's the only time I believe we have ever been in a high risk in November for severe weather. And also we had a PDS tornado watch for Michigan, if you can believe that. So there was a lot of things that happened that day that you just knew. And that whole event was just a great way of how this whole system worked for the National Weather Service, for amateur radio, because we had, you figure the 17th, firearm deer season is the 15th of November for us. So we had over hundreds of thousands of people out in the woods hunting that weekend in remote cabins that usually don't have a whole lot of radio or TV. They're out in the woods hunting. And we had, it was a serious situation that we had to try to get that message to as many people as we could. So that was a big issue for us during that time. And thank goodness there were no fatalities, but just the wind damage alone was incredible through our area. And of course the tornadoes that we don't have very often, to have that happen in our county that time was pretty surreal. But again, it's all the training that we had done for communicating that made that, the whole communication process between us, the National Weather Service, the way they embrace us and they take our information, everything just worked very well together. And I think, we all have those caveats or those little different areas like our Lake Michigan. We all know our certain areas that we have that are kind of different and that require some different attention. And when you have spotters that know that and can relay that information back to the National Weather Service in a timely manner, I think it is just huge.
Yeah, we've talked many times on this show, Jeff, about the importance of communication. And folks providing that service that you are critical in the dissemination process.
Absolutely. And again, I think it's, I appreciate the fact that the National Weather Service, they take time to come train us, and they do an advanced spotter class, and they've sat down with us and helped us out and let us know what we can do to better get them information. And they've done some good things, as far as, showing us appreciation and, coming and doing those kind of classes. So it's kind of a two-way street, and like I said, it keeps me involved in what I love to do. And obviously, no chance of me going back to college and becoming a meteorologist at this point in my life, but it can be involved and, still have something I love to do. And radio has just been huge. James we talked about emergency stations. One thing that really piqued my interest after I got my technician class licenses, that guy who's teaching the class kind of came back and said, listen, if you guys want to still come in on Monday nights, and in another month, we'll kind of try to get our general class license. I think there's only 6 or 7 of us. So we did, because like I said, it was like a college class every Monday night. But one of the things he said is when it got warmer, is he said, next week we're going to meet in the middle of Ross Park, and I'm going to set up a small field station. And so the next Monday we roll out there, and he rolls this cart out in the middle of this field. He's opened up a table. He put a battery, he put his radio, and he stuck an antenna up in a bucket of sand. It literally took him 10 minutes to set this station up. And he gets on the radio and he says, CQ, 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 calling any station 20 meters, call CQ, and standing by. And we had about a minute and a half conversation with Hans in Germany for about a minute and a half on this radio out in the middle of the field with a battery, a radio, and an antenna. And I was just flabbergasted that I could sit down in my basement here and talk around the world on a radio. So the weather and radio thing kind of went hand in hand. And like, I think, Jay and Rob had said, I've met so many great people, and so many people, because our amateur radio Skywarn folks are really involved with our RACES group too, which is our radio emergency communication services. So there's probably a lot of times where some stations may go from a Skywarn net right into an emergency net if you have a lot of damage or things going on. So it's been a wonderful. I met some great people that I would literally go into battle with that do this stuff, and they give up their time, and it's a good group of people, and it's for a good cause. I love it.
All right, Rob, talk about working with tornadoes up in New England. You've had some of those. People don't think tornadoes happen there. They do.
Well, yeah, and it's very odd because if you look nationally, the numbers of tornadoes was well below normal. Would you believe New England was above normal? Would you believe that the state of Connecticut broke their state record for tornadoes this year? So it was kind of a strange year here in New England. And it wasn't like we had, there's times we'll get some of the outbreaks similar to the Midwest. I go back to June 1st, 2011, when we had an EF3 tornado, a 38-mile long track from Westfield through Springfield, Massachusetts, and Sturbridge and Charlton, Massachusetts. That was an incredible day. We had hams reporting debris raining down at their homes 40 miles away with all the higher end damage out in the tornado path, getting these reports in real time. And it was a taste of what Jay and Jeff deal with out in the Midwest that day. This wasn't like that this year, even though we had a lot of tornadoes, but they were all in kind of the EF0, EF1 range. We had that really tropical air mass, in the spring. But the one day I really want to talk about was a day in October this past year, Tuesday, October 23rd, and it really caught everybody off guard. And it was a case where there was actually a lot of instability in the low levels of the atmosphere, and we actually did a review of this. I'd asked the Weather Service to do they had a review done on it, and they presented it to our coordinator staff in our Skywarn coordinator meeting about what had happened that day. I mean, we only had temperatures in the 50s, but we had very cold temperatures at 500 millibars, and we had this low-level cape with high helicity. And we had 4 tornadoes on October 23rd, 1 in Rhode Island and 3 in Massachusetts, one actually right in the same town as our Weather Service office in Norton. And we couldn't even try to get to the Weather Service because the way it was transpiring, it was actually right in the path between where I was and a couple of our other operators and the Weather Service. So we did a lot of it remotely, and we were able to get a lot of the damage reports, and we had quite a bit of hail with that event. And it was, the tornado warnings came out in a timely fashion, but we didn't have a lot of the heads up, and it was an interesting event. Luckily, there were no injuries. And you say, well, this must be very unusual, like unprecedented. And I actually went back through tornadoproject.com and looked at some of the numbers, and I actually found another 4 tornado day in New England. If you drew up the same coverage area as our current Weather Service office, it was roughly it was the same number. I think it was back in the mid 50s. So it was unusual, but not unprecedented type of situation. But we used a lot of our techniques to be able to pull out a lot of information. We were very lucky. In one case, we had a Skywarn spotter, amateur radio operator, works for the North Providence, Rhode Island Fire Department, who was giving us information in near real time. And we had another amateur operator that gathered reports, initially from public safety, but then was able to get into the area and get us some pictures, kind of, that initial sit rep to determine whether that area needed to be surveyed. And that was one of the areas that was surveyed and confirmed as a tornado. So, that is always, I think, the most challenging is our severe weather situations. And here in New England, it's all these marginal cases that, we're always, so we have a self-activation procedure that we have, that if the warning goes out or a criteria report gets in, we'll fire up a net, because we'll have these situations where it looks like a nothing day, and then all of a sudden things line up in a way where we have to self-activate. And that was a very interesting case for us that we're hoping to learn from and kind of see if that type of signal is there again. We just have some people in better position, but we were able to do a remarkable job of gathering the reports on that day, despite the very subtle nature of how that situation developed.
And before we go to Jay to talk about August 24th, What about the big nor'easters where, Boston's buried in snow? Do you activate for those, the ham radio group?
Absolutely. So, in March of this year, we had those three major nor'easters. We had the March 2nd storm. We were getting hurricane force wind gusts on the Cape. We had measurements well over 90 miles an hour. We're convinced somebody had probably over 100 somewhere on the Cape with that event, and some of the towns here in Southeast Mass, not far from my area of New Bedford in Rochester, Mass. I mean, entire town without power for several days. It took them a while to clean up the damage, and this was a heavy rain, high wind event for our area for that first storm. It's not like we had wet snow. We didn't have leaves on the trees, so that makes a difference when you get in the tree damage. But we had extensive tree damage with that, even without the leaves, and that was an interesting event. The second storm wasn't as much on the wind, but we had very heavy wet snow. We had thunder snow, not quite where Jim Cantori was, so he was a little disappointed by that. But there was, we had the wet snow, and we had a lot of downed trees from the wet snow with that storm. And then the third storm was a blizzard, and we actually had cell phone service. The AT&T wireless on the Cape was out for over a day from that blizzard. We had, again, the hurricane force wind gusts, not quite as strong as the first storm, but we did have a few wind gusts to hurricane force. And there we had the wet snow on the Cape, and that just did another round of significant tree damage. And we were active at our National Weather Service office. We put in some long hours, and it's funny because that was the end of that month is when they were moving. And so they wanted to break down the amateur station, and I said, I don't have a problem with that, but could you leave our VHF, UHF antennas up at least, just in case we need to go there? And they said, yeah, we'll do that. Well, sure enough, after we had those three major storms, and we actually have we brought in our own equipment. I have kits that we actually made up, literally, that are in suitcase type of kits. So we literally walked in with the two radio setups, opened up the kits, plugged in the antennas that were there in the office, plugged in power, and we were on the air. And the forecasters looked over like, wow, that's pretty quick setup and everything. And they were very happy that they had left the antennas up, because we were there for all three of those storms, and we were there for long periods of time. So yeah, we do activate for the winter storms, and we actually get we'll get hundreds of reports between the snowfall, the wind damage, the wind measurements, and such. Well, and even coastal flooding. We'll get some of the coastal flooding reports. So those sometimes are our busiest events, where there's just so much data and information coming in, versus the severe weather, where it can be very active, but it's a lot of times it's a hunting expedition to find those localized areas of damage. Even with some of those tornadoes, because they're relatively small and localized in nature.
All right, Jay, let's go back to Kokomo. What are you showing there?
All right, so I'm sharing my screen now, and for those of you who are listening, I'll try to describe it. What this is a radar rotation map that was created by the National Weather Service Northern Indiana office, and I'm in their county warning area. And it shows what happened on August 24, 2016, which is the biggest tornado event that has occurred since I became a spotter back in the late 70s, early 80s. So all those years of being a spotter, I never saw anything as big as this. I hope I never do again. I probably won't. I think it's going to be one of those once in a generation kind of outbreaks. But one of the first places that was hit badly here in Indiana was down in central Indiana, which you can see in the lower left-hand corner of the screen. You can see a map here with composite radar rotation images on it. And you can see a big white blob over Kokomo, and that's where the Starbucks restaurant got flattened. So anybody who doesn't recognize the date, August 24, 2016, probably remembers seeing the photo of the flattened Starbucks in central Indiana. This was that system. And it wasn't long after that, maybe an hour or so, that storms started forming farther north. And what you need to understand, I think, about Indiana is that supercells are relatively rare here. We don't get the kind of storm modes that you get out in the plains very often. We mostly get lines of storms, or maybe some small embedded tornadoes in what the meteorologists call a quasi-linear convective system, or squall line. That's what's typical for us here in northern Indiana. We don't see a lot of supercells. This was a day of not just one supercell, but many supercells forming over and over. One of them almost formed over the city of Fort Wayne, which is where I am. And that's what you can see on my screen now. You can see where Fort Wayne is. You can see a little bit of rotation right over the center of the city. And you can see rotation getting stronger as that storm moved northeast. When I was that day, I was the net control station. I was the guy who was both coordinating the conference call, and I was at the same time, because nobody else was available, the liaison to the National Weather Service. So not only was I deciding who got to talk when, but I was typing their reports when they came in into the NWS chat system, which I know you've talked about on the show before. I think most people are probably familiar with, but basically it's a private internet chat room for the Weather Service. So I was doing all that talking and typing, and they issued this tornado warning, and the southwesterly edge of the polygon is right over where I'm sitting. I was sitting right here in our house, in my office. This is where I do my day-to-day work as a public relations consultant. I didn't have a lot of client deadlines that day, so I was able to take time off work to participate in this event. And that tornado warning got issued, and I'm right square inside of the polygon, and that rarely happens as well. So I took a quick break, ran outside, looked up at the sky to see if there's anything I could see that needed to be reported. There wasn't, so I ran back in here and continued to take reports and relay them. And one of the interesting things about that day is, first off, we ended up having an EF3 bit of damage in northeastern Allen County, which is really rare for around here. We probably will never see another EF3 tornado again as long as I live, at least I hope. And you
just jinxed it, Jay.
I hope not. Yeah. But we were also blessed because the tornado and the funnel clouds first started forming just after it got to the outskirts of the city rather than in the city. And it was right around the end of the workday. So a lot of our spotters were just getting off work and were getting out into the field and were in position to call in these reports, eyewitness reports of the tornado as it formed, as it made its first touchdown, as it streaked across northeastern Indiana. And I was in the position to relay all those reports in NWS chat. The other interesting thing, I don't want to take too much more time, but the other interesting thing about that particular outbreak is it was the first test of a new way to get reports in from spotters who are not hams. I had developed friendship with a number of spotters and chasers who were already using a communication app on their smartphones called Zello. That's Z as in zebra, ELLO. You can look it up online if you want. It basically makes your smartphone act like a walkie-talkie, and you can talk with others who are using the app. So these spotter chasers were already using that app to coordinate with each other when they were out and about. I noticed through the spotter network beaconing system that they were in place to make reports. So I was doing triple duty, actually, because I was picking up their reports from the Zello app, typing those into NWS chat, picking up hand radio reports from my radio here on my desk, typing those into NWS chat. By the time the whole event was over, I went back and counted up. We were able to relay 50 reports of tornadoes, funnel clouds, and similar events to the National Weather Service Weather Forecast Office in northern Indiana. And I found out later that turned out to be very helpful to them. They had an excellent warning record that day.
Awesome. And I think the thing we've learned here is the fact that you don't have to be a professional to be involved in the weather enterprise. You three guys don't get paid a dime, right, for what you do. Correct. It's volunteer work, but yet it's very rewarding. And goodness, you can be so plugged in and such an important part of the warning process. But we have to take a very quick break here for Tony Rice in the Astronomy Report. Aubrey, you got time for an email segment after Tony?
I do.
Awesome. We're going to roll Tony. We'll come back with email, picks of the week, and much more as WeatherBrains rolls along.
Looking beyond the atmosphere, here's Tony Rice with your Astronomy Outlook.
Tuesday, January 8th, SpaceX plans the launch of 10 communication satellites from Vandenberg Air Force Base in California at 7:48 a.m. Pacific. This is the 8th and final launch that will complete the fleet of 75 next-generation Iridium communication satellites. The Iridium satellite constellation provides voice and data to handheld phones and other devices. You've probably seen them in TV and movies in the hands of characters who are receiving plot-changing phone calls. You might even use the network when you're checking your email on a commercial airline flight. The name comes from the animated models of the original 77 active satellite design, conceived in the early 90s because it looked a little bit like the 77 electrons orbiting the nucleus of an iridium atom. You can see these satellites pass over your house with the naked eye, if you know when and where to look, for a little bit longer at least. Each first-generation satellite is about the size of a pickup truck, and it's equipped with 3 highly polished antenna panels pointing earthward. These panels can reflect sunlight, creating a brief flash of light, or flare. Now, you may have seen the International Space Station pass over before, and that can get pretty bright. Iridium flares are even brighter. Unlike the station, which can be visible for 5 to 7 minutes sometimes, iridium flares last only 5 to 20 seconds. But your opportunities to see an iridium flare are growing short. This next generation of satellites doesn't have those highly reflective panels, and the old fleet is dying off. 57 have already been deorbited, 25 have failed and are no longer being controlled, making predicting those flares pretty much impossible, leaving only 13 satellites, which will likely be deorbited before spring. But there are opportunities. And while I'd like to be able to give predictions for WeatherBrains listeners around the world, it's just too varied. But Tarmo, if you're listening in Estonia, there's a pair of really bright ones predicted for Tuesday at just before 6:26 a.m. and Wednesday at 5:46 a.m. For the rest of us, though, there's a number of smartphone apps, both on the Android and iOS app stores, which will predict these iridium flares for you. Also, the website heavens-above.com displays these predictions. That's your astronomy outlook. Follow me at RTP Hokie for more spacey stuff like this.
All right, time to break into the good old email inbox and see what's in there this week.
Letters. We get letters. We get stacks and stacks of letters.
That's your cue, Aubrey. Go.
Okay. All right. Now I'm unmuted. I was turning the fan off and I got all confused.
Hot and bothered.
And that's a show title.
It's all getting to my head. All right. So this one comes from Wayne Thompson. Would love to see video of the UFO clouds. If you did not tune in last week, we were talking Pacific Coast weather, and the UFO clouds would be the lenticular clouds that we were talking about for the West Coast. Is that the only place in the country that you can see such clouds, or could they be viewed in Alabama also? Now, I know occasionally we do get some lenticular clouds in the Shenandoah Valley, usually in the November kind of ish range, November to January, or even in the early spring, we do see them here. Have you guys ever seen lenticulars in Alabama, James, in your little rolling hills?
Yes, on rare occasion, not often, but we have had in the past, yes.
All right, so Wayne, you're going to be looking for the lenticular clouds, and you really want, you want the full effect. Let's see, Denver had some really cool, I saw some on Twitter. Denver had some really awesome lenticular clouds they were tweeting out. I don't know who from Denver, just all of Denver was tweeting out lenticulars this week. So awesome.
Last time I saw lenticular clouds was at the NWA in Salt Lake City, and we had them the same day of the partial solar eclipse. So we're all standing out there, and you've got the eclipse and you've got a lenticular cloud stacked, as a matter of fact, coming over the mountains. It's just, you can't beat that.
No, that's pretty incredible. All right. And this one also from Wayne. I really enjoyed listening to you, Mr. Span. Then in the middle of a sentence, I believe maybe he's talking about the pick of the week, they disconnected you. I wanted to hear more of what you were saying.
Yeah, everybody hung up on me or something. No telling. It's no telling. Maybe I hung up on myself.
Unacceptable. So, and this one comes from Mark Ingalls. The Pacific Northwest show was fantastic. I'm traveling to Europe with my wife and was able to catch it on my flight from London to Reykjavik. And we were able to see the northern lights on the plane. And he sent an awesome photo, a couple of photos. Two of them. Yeah. Awesome photos. And thought I would share. I love hearing the conversation that you guys were able to have, and look forward to future shows. I'll probably listen tonight on the show back to Seattle tomorrow. So awesome. So thanks for the emails, guys. We appreciate that. If you'd like to send us an email at weatherbrains.com. If you'd like to send us maybe a show suggestion, a guest suggestion, with, of course, contact information that helps Bill out greatly. Also, maybe what you like about the show. Maybe give us a email link or what you like to see on the show. We'd love to hear it. email@weatherbrains.com.
All right, so Nate, you got to go here in a second. Just quickly, more thoughts about AMS before you hit the hay for tonight. What's to come this week? What's got you turned on about the rest of the meeting?
Yeah, it's a lot of stuff. I mean, in spite of the fact that we don't have the federal folks here, I mean, there's still a lot of great content. I'm planning on doing some risk communication and visual communication stuff tomorrow. There's also a panel on the health effects of weather and how one particular tool is how we can use a forecast wet bulb globe temperature to help protect athletes and spectators at sporting events. So that'll be pretty interesting. So there's still some really good stuff on the menu over the next couple of days, and but the federal folks definitely are missed.
You know, the hardest part of those AMS meetings for me, it's deciding which sessions to attend. Do they still have the app?
Yeah.
You get on there, planning app.
Yeah. I spent some time on the flight out here yesterday, going through one day at a time, and the app's pretty cool. You just look at sessions and you can tap, and every time you tap something for a time period, you've already got something tapped. It'll pop up a little message and says, you've already got something else scheduled. By the time you're done, you got like 6 different things at every time slot. And it's like Sophie's choice to try and figure out, okay, which session am I actually going to try and sit in? And especially since, invariably, if this is the convention center, right? There's one talk here that I want to see, and then the next talk I want to see is way over here. And you can't get from here to here, and it's 3 different levels, and there's escalators and elevators and stuff like that. Let's put it this way. My Apple Watch, I've already hit my circles for today. Closed them up. We're good to go. I did that like at lunchtime. So that's the thing about AMS. If you want to kickstart an exercise program where you want to get 10,000 steps a day, 15,000 steps a day, just show up to an AMS annual meeting. You'll do it before lunch.
Awesome. Well, thanks for being on the show tonight, Nate, and we'll get a full debriefing next time you're on the show about everything else that happened out there. But again, if you missed it, the one thing we did learn for sure: never, ever, ever eat barbecue at the Phoenix airport. Never. So, Kevin, have you ever had barbecue out there before?
No, but I have to comment on that and the breadth of this show, because at the beginning, in 5 minutes time, we went from a discussion of Nate's intestinal health to Aubrey getting naked in an edit booth.
Yeah. Only on this show do you get this variety here.
Everything's fair game.
Yeah. So, all right, we're coming up on 15 till. I got to scoot here in a second, but let's start working on the. I want to kind of wrap up the ham radio thing before we go to picks of the week here. One more time, and I'll let either one of you 3 guys answer. Somebody's listening; they want to get involved. Is the best start just go to ARRL.org? Would you recommend that, or what's the first thing you do?
Yep.
Yeah. I think that's a good place to start. I also think, at your local Skywarn classes, if your county has a Skywarn class, a lot of time the ham radio operators are there. If you can make contact with them there, they're a breadth of information, and they've got the resources. There's books that a lot of them will hand down to you as far as getting your technician class and that, and they'll usually have an idea of when your weekly class or your monthly classes. Ours is at the first, I believe, the first Saturday of the month at our Red Cross building here in the Muskegon County. So they have them every month, and I think that's a good place to start. There's a lot of places I think Jay had brought up, and Rob, about going to the ARRL website for the practice test. There's a lot of resources out there too. So I think both of those are good ways to get involved, or to begin to get involved.
And Jeff just reminded me of something that the other hams who are listening might be interested in. Our local radio club has started putting an information table up in the lobby at the Spotter Talks, so that we can catch people as they go in. And if they're not hams, we can provide them information right there about how to become a ham and how to get connected. So that's something some of the other clubs around the country might want to try.
Yeah, we've also I've got permission to give part of the talk at our Skywarn class. When I was the coordinator, I would give about a 15-minute spiel, and I played Rob's video once or twice to the class to show them what amateur radio is about and how they can get involved with Skywarn and take it one step further above being just a Skywarn spotter, which is important. But if you have a love like we do, it's a great way to increase your participation. And so, yeah, if you can get, a couple of plug at your Skywarn classes, and talk about amateur radio, it's another great way.
And again, I want to mention too, people are going to say, well, what do you do when there are no storms, no blizzards, no tornadoes? There's a lot of fun stuff. I mean, you got sweepstakes, you got field day, you develop a close-knit relationship with people that you talk to on the air. You can have fun on good weather days too.
Oh, yeah. And there's also another public safety aspect as well. In fact, just a couple of weeks ago, the 29th of December, I was standing out in the middle of a woods providing communications for a 50K trail run because out there in the middle of the woods, there was no reliable cell service. So we populated the whole course with ham radio operators to protect the runner's safety.
Yeah, and I'll make a couple comments here. One is one of the other things I do with an amateur radio is provided communications, and we'll be providing communications again this year for the Boston Marathon. And we were active in 2013 with the bombings. Amateur radio played a couple of different roles, kind of more of a secondary role to help with the medical situation at the finish line. But one of the primary roles that we did was all the logistics of stopping the race with the support of the Red Cross and public safety and getting the runners situated back to loved ones at a different location because they couldn't go to the finish line. And cell phones were not working. Text was overloaded. Phone calls were not getting through for the most part. So amateur radio helped in that vein. Public safety radios were up, but amateur radio helped with a lot of the other work that maybe Red Cross would have said, well, let me pick up my cell phone and do it. Well, that wasn't really an option back in 2013. And there's almost 300 amateurs, 280 amateurs that support the Boston Marathon each year. And that's something we did. And last year, weather played a role in it. We had heavy rain and wind gusts to 40 miles an hour and temperatures of 40 degrees. It was kind of a tough marathon with the weather. And some of us as amateurs also helped providing weather information, both in our State Emergency Operations Center and the race officials, and ad-libbed a little bit for some things when some of the towns opened up some warming centers out of concern for the runners. So, that's another example of how we play a role in non-emergencies. And I'll make a quick statement about the relationships. I mean, I've met so many different people that I wouldn't have met without amateur radio. I wouldn't have met Jay. I met Jeff tonight indirectly from amateur radio. And our coordinator for the National Hurricane Center down in Miami, Julio Rapol, he's been doing the operation there for close to 40 years, 39th year of operation. And he's a gentleman I've met and become friends with that I just never would have become friends with without the service and doing the public service in amateur radio. So that's a couple comments there about the relationships and what else you can do with amateur radio.
I got one thing to add after Aubrey.
Yeah, awesome show, guys. I mean, I have no idea about amateur radio. I've always been interested in kind of, I know we have a couple of, amateur radio operators around the area. So I'm really glad I had a chance to kind of listen in and stuff. And it was really interesting to hear you guys talk, and all the megahertz and the gigahertz and stuff like that makes my head explode. So I have no idea about any of that, but it's really interesting what you guys do and all important stuff. And I do have to go and do TV, but one thing I do need to do is give a shout out to our friends over at the Storm Front Freaks podcast, because they did a giveaway this December on Twitter, and I actually won one of their items for this giveaway, and I won this very large AccuRite weather station, which I'm really excited about because I've always wanted an anemometer, and I've never bought myself a weather station, and I've always wanted an anemometer, and now I have an anemometer, so I have to give them a big shout out. So great job, and give our friends there a listen. After you listen to WeatherBrains, you can give our friends there a follow at the Stormfront Freaks podcast.
Yeah, and let me say, I've got to do some television. Dr. John, you are our official broadcaster on duty here, so I'm going to let you kind of do picks of the week and wrap things up because a lot of us have to go do television. But guys, thank you all for the ham radio episode tonight. It was great. John, the floor belongs to you.
Thanks, James. It's been a great show. I did CV when I was a kid, and I always ham radio. Yeah, someday maybe I'd like to get involved in that.
I think a lot of people think that too. It's just it's a good old boys group, and it's not that way. I mean, there's a lot of women in amateur radio, a lot of kids in amateur radio. They've got the Jamboree on the Air for the young kids. The guy Mark Derby that I was talking about that kind of got me interested. His daughter got her amateur radio license when she was 9. Her name's Nicole, and her call sign was K0LEY Coley. So it's for anybody of any age, and anybody can join. It's a lot of fun, and it's not just weather. I got into it just for weather and assumed I was going to have one radio for $30 and I was going to do weather, and was going to be it. And I've been introduced to doing runs like Rob had said. We've got the Sergeant Preston Yukon run that we do. We've got different events that we have spotters out and and do communications for different events. So any facet that you're into, whether you're into electronics, whether you're into TV, whether you're into broadcasting, anything, ham radio has got a little bit of depth in everything you could think of. So it's been a lot of fun, and like they said, I've met a lot of great people doing it too.
Here's something, John, and this will make Kevin happy. He'll appreciate this because a lot of I've heard several friends in ham radio. This doesn't come from me, and I don't even remember who first said it, so I can't credit it. But I've heard people say that ham radio is effectively the world's first social network.
Yes. Let's go back and make it the only social network.
I'm heading in your direction, Kevin. I'll be honest with you. Do you have a pick of the week, Kevin, for us?
Yeah, I think Weather Service offices, and John, maybe you know more about this, are rolling these out one by one, but it's a winter weather forecast page, and Rick's office just has fairly recently done it. It's been up and down a little bit, but you can find them at weather.gov/OUN in Rick's case, or whatever your office name is, /winter, and there's some nice products on there.
Yeah, State College, which is our local office, is doing that. They have some great probabilistic products on that page. So good idea.
Exactly. Yeah, I've punched up a couple. Like Fort Worth has one, but just to punch in another, I punched in BNA Nashville and didn't see one. I think they're kind of coming one by one.
Yeah, I think you're right. They're a little more progressive in State College. I really like these products. We actually had a discussion at one of the meetings a couple of years ago about actually bringing this online, and all of us were for it.
Yeah, it's nice page, and it worked real well in this last winter weather event that we had here.
Excellent. Great. Thanks, Kevin. You probably have to go do television now, right?
Getting pretty close. Yes, sir.
Okay. Well, let me carry on with POWs here for the rest of us. Jeff, do you have one for us? Oh, you're muted.
Yeah, I'm gonna share my screen here real quick, and I still haven't figured out how to do that. Is there a place over here to share the screen? There we go.
Yeah.
Got it. W5YI is a group, and it's Gordon West, and he's got a lot of great amateur radio books for technicians, for general class, and it's the book I got when I started to take my test. You can get it for, I think, $20. One of them's got the CD, I think, for $34.99. You've got a CD that comes with it, and you can hear some different propagation on VHF. So there's a lot of good reference materials out there, but that was the book that I got when I started getting my tech license. So I would recommend anybody, it's a good page to check out, but Gordon West has got a lot of awards for his books and that. So I would recommend that.
That's great. That's exactly the kind of thing James was asking about. So if you're interested in ham radio, amateur radio, great place to start. Thanks, Jeff. Well, Jay, how about you? How about your
I'll tell you what, I'm going to let Rob go next because I have 3 to choose from. And so we'll see if he chooses one of the ones I was going to use, and I'll use another one if he does. So why don't you go next, Rob?
Okay, Rob.
All right. Well, I guess for a pick of the week, I guess I could mention our VOIP Hurricane Net website at voipwx.net. You can learn more about our ways of linking amateur radio systems through the internet. Primary modes have been a mode called EchoLink that I mentioned before. That's also a PC program and a phone app. You still have to have your amateur radio license, but it has a couple of other modes associated with it. And also use another mode called IRLP, which is called the Internet Radio Linking Project. It's how we combine our networks together to try to gather information during hurricanes. And as I said, here in New England, we use similar technology for one of our regional nets for our amateur radio station at the Weather Service Boston Norton, WX1BOX. And we've also been using some other technology called DMR, digital Motorola radio, I believe it stands for. And we have that mode inside of amateur radio now. And we have some linking capability there, as well as D-Star, which was founded by the ICOM group. We've been working with those modes as well. And we'll probably be continuing to work with those and potentially linking them into our net. I think we've done that a couple of times now. Outside of hurricane net activations, we may be able to do that during activations here going forward. So we're always trying to learn more about the digital modes and things that we can do to communicate and interoperate. And as I said, we use modern social media as well as amateur radio being the original form of social media. So we have a VOIPWXNet Facebook page and Twitter feed as well. So I guess that'll be my pick of the week for today.
That covers it. Way to go, Rob. Anything left for you, Jay?
All right. So yeah, I'm actually gonna give you a smorgasbord. First, I'm gonna tag on to what Jeff said. There's another really good resource for people who want to learn the stuff they need to know to get a license, and it comes from our national organization, the ARRL. That's the National Association for Ham Radio Operation, and they have something called the License Manual. So if you go to arrl.org and just search for License Manual, you can find that publication, and that's I like the one that Jeff mentioned. That's another one that will teach you what you need to know to pass the test. Also at the ARRL, they have this nifty book. It's called Storm Spotting in Amateur Radio, second edition. So this is targeted mostly at ham radio operators who have, for whatever reason, not gotten into storm spotting yet. But I think it would be just as valuable for people who are not hams and maybe know a little bit about weather, but want to see how the two tie together. So this book is also available at arrl.org. And finally, I'll provide for the show notes a link to the website on which we host the standard operations procedures for our Skywarn net, in case anybody wants to dig into the nitty gritty about how people make calls and make reports and how the whole thing is run. I'll make that available as a pick of the week.
Yeah.
That's great, Jay. Scott Martin was just emailing or texting the rest of us here in the chat room. Please send those links to him so that we can get them on the show notes and on the webpage. That's excellent. So I guess I'm left with the pick of the week, and I can't get away from the situation that's happening in Washington because I just find this so egregious. So my pick of the week is a link to an op-ed that was provided by the Capital Weather Gang. So we want to thank them for making this accessible. The op-ed is titled President Trump Support the U.S. Weather Prediction Community, Both Its Ideas and Its People. And it goes on to talk about how far-reaching the government shutdown is. And I won't say any more. You've heard me talk about this for 2 weeks now. I'm just drives me crazy. We need to solve this problem.
Try that now.
Yeah.
Scott, do you have a pick of the week for us?
I actually do. First of all, before I get to my pick of the week, one important thing that I learned while talking to everybody before the show, before we started our test calls throughout the weekend, is that HAM is not an acronym.
No. That's right.
So that was very interesting to learn that was not an acronym. But
yeah,
my pick of the week is for a little project that I do on the side called Racecast Weather. And I got a screen share of it right here of our webpage. And we pretty much do, myself and a couple other forecasters, we do forecasts for some of the major racing series throughout the United States, IndyCar, any other open-wheeled series, and sports car series. So just something, like I said, we do on the side, and we don't do it to make money, but you know, if anybody wants to join in and become a site sponsor, I mean, that would be awesome. But just something that, like I said, we do on the side and have fun with, and keeping the fans and the teams and drivers, you know, well informed on what to expect instead of looking at an app to get their weather.
Great, Scott. Thanks. Well, I guess at this point, I want to thank our guests, Jay Prater, Rob Macedo, and Jeff Staple for joining us. This has been an outstanding discussion on amateur radio. We've talked about getting the show on for months, I think. So it's great to finally have it on and to have those great links for anyone who's interested in amateur radio. It's going to be me. I'm going to have to hit these links as well.
Do it.
So thanks for joining us this evening, guys.
Oh, it's been a pleasure. I've enjoyed it, and hopefully we can get some more hams out there and involved in weather, and getting that message back to the National Weather Service as quick and as efficient as we can.
Indeed. This is a highly respected podcast, and it's indeed an honor just to be here and participate in it. I really appreciate the invitation to talk about our hobby and how it relates to weather and public safety. So thank you very much for that. I did want to mention that we had hoped another ham might be able to join us this evening. Brian Smith is a ham, but he's also a warning coordination meteorologist at the National Weather Service office in Omaha. And he's put together a really nice presentation. He did some research on the whole history of storm spotting in the United States. And some of it includes how the hams got involved, but it starts well before that. So Scott knows about this guy, and I'm going to recommend that maybe you guys consider another show just on the history of storm spotting sometime down the road.
Actually, that's a great idea. And Jay, I owe you an apology. I know your last name is Farlow, not Prater. That was a slip of the tongue. I apologize.
I was going to let it go.
I apologize for that. And it's a great idea. Having storm spotting on here as a subject matter would be excellent. I've been involved in that. I've been involved in the classes. Yes, we need to do more of that as well. And I'm looking at the clock, and we just passed 11 p.m. here in the East. I turned into a pumpkin at 11 p.m., so we need to cut the show off.
Just before you go, let's do contact information. I'm on Twitter.
Oh, yeah, sure.
At radio W9LW. So that's my ham call sign preceded by the word radio is my Twitter handle. That's because Twitter apparently doesn't allow 4-character handles. So I had to stick the word radio in front of my call sign. A lot of hams just use their call sign if they have a longer one. You can also reach me via email at my call sign, w9lw@arrl.net. And I'll be happy to answer any questions anybody might have about ham radio or anything we talked about tonight. Rob, why don't you give your contact info?
Yeah. And let me just echo, it's an honor and a privilege to be on this show and on this panel. And I want to thank Jay for reaching out to me on this. And Jeff, it's really great to meet you and really exciting to hear you use the video that we created. So great to be on the show tonight. Thank you very, very much for having me. My contact information, I am on Twitter personally now. I've maintained some other general social media pages. I finally put together a personal one. It's Macedo_weather on Twitter. And my email, you could just use my call sign, KD1CY@ARRL.net. And also rmacedo@rcn.com works. So some contact information for here. And again, really a pleasure to be on the show tonight.
Thank you, Rob. Jeff, how about your contact?
Yeah, you can reach me at w8swx@comcast.net. Again, that's my radio call sign, and that's really all I'm on. just my email. But I would also maybe tell Rob I would post a link to your video, because that's outstanding, and that'd be something that anybody, I think if anybody watched, would be fired up about getting into ham radio, and especially if you are interested in weather. So w8swx@comcast.net, and it has been a pleasure, and I listen every week, and glad to be part of it, and glad to hear the ham radio community is still alive, and hopefully we'll get a few members after the show.
Thanks, Jeff. All three of you honor us by being on the program. All of us are doing this because we're passionate about weather, but we're also passionate about saving life and property. So we're all in this together. Thanks a lot, guys. Scott, you want to close us out, or should I be doing that?
I'll let you do that.
Okay. Well, you've been joining us for the weekly podcast, WeatherBrains. We are on every Monday, with the exception of some holidays, but we haven't missed a week in decades, so it seems. We're on typically 8:30 Central Time, 9:30 in the East, which means at this point it's past 11 o'clock and we need to get to the East. I'm John Scala. We appreciate your time this evening. If you have any email you want to send to us, send it to email@weatherbrains.com. We'll be on next Monday evening, 9:30 Eastern, 8:30 Central. Thanks a lot, guys. Have a great one.
Well, that was fun.
Excellent.
Oh, that was fun.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much, guys, for coming on.
Absolutely.
That was an incredible show.
Good. Hopefully get a lot of good reviews, and who knows, maybe they'll want us back someday.
Oh,
Happy to help
doubt.
anytime.
Thanks a lot.
All right. Good night,
Thanks a
guys.
lot.
All right, y'all have a good night.
Thank you.
Go Tigers.
No, they're not. They are not on the air. So we're going to do this rare thing where we simulcast WeatherBrains and Song of the Night. We are on Instagram and YouTube. For those watching on the YouTube side on WeatherBrains, had a really fun show tonight with ham radio is the topic. I've had my ham license since I was 14, and it will be on the podcast apps within a few hours. So thank you guys for watching, and we'll see you guys next Monday night. Thanks a lot for watching. Have a great week, and God bless.